let me check my mic here. Is it working? Okay. So good morning. My name is Karen Bengtson. I'm going to, in this talk, cover an overview of the pre-ANDA program, the pre-ANDA meeting process. And in the second half of this presentation, Suneela is going to cover the program metrics and trends that we've seen in GDUFA 2 so far, and also give you helpful tips that you should consider when you're getting ready to submit your meeting package. So the goals of the pre-ANDA meeting, the pre-ANDA program, are to clarify regulatory expectations early in development, assist applicants to develop more complete submissions, promoting an efficient review of your ANDA, and also hopefully increasing the potential for a first cycle approval for complex products. So this slide provides you with an overview of how complex products are defined in the GDUFA 2 commitment letter. It also provides some examples of drugs that we would put into each of those categories. The category other products includes any products for which there's uncertainty in the approval pathway, or if there is the possible alternative approach could benefit from early scientific engagement. So the components of the pre-ANDA program are research, product-specific guidances, control correspondence, and meetings for complex drug products. The research that's done under GDUFA initiatives helps the FDA develop new tools to evaluate generic drug bioequivalence, and that feeds directly into our recommendations in our product-specific guidance development. So product-specific guidances are going to provide you with the agency's current thinking and expectations on how to develop generic drugs that are therapeutically equivalent to specific reference-listed drugs. And we have over 1,700 PSGs currently available and posted at the website that's linked here. We also provide a forecast of new and revised PSGs for complex generic drug products. And the list there also gives you an idea if the expected revision would be a major, minor, or editorial revision. So one of the mechanisms that you have available to you to get feedback from the agency is control correspondence. And this image right here actually in the PDF is a link directly to the guidance. In control correspondences, there's two types. Standard control correspondence, which the FDA will review and respond to within 60 days. And that's going to be for a specific element of your drug development program. A complex control correspondence, on the other hand, has to do with the evaluation of clinical content, bioequivalence protocols for reference-listed drugs with risk evaluation and mitigation strategies with elements to ensure safe use, and also alternate BE approaches within the same study type. If you receive your response from the agency and determine that part of that response is ambiguous, you can submit a request for clarification within 7 days of receipt, and FDA will respond to that request within 14 days. So there's 3 types of meetings that are available under GDUFA 2. The first 2 occur before submission of your ANDA. They are product development meetings and pre-submission meetings. Product development meetings are meant to be a scientific exchange to discuss your proposals, your specific issues and questions. FDA will provide you with targeted advice regarding your ongoing ANDA development program. Pre-submission meetings, on the other hand, are to discuss the content and format of your upcoming ANDA submission. FDA can provide you feedback on elements that need to be clarified before you submit your ANDA. It does not include a substantial review of your summary reports or data. And you would submit this around the time when you expect to submit your ANDA within 6 months of the meeting. So maybe a year out from when you plan to submit your ANDA. So after you submit your ANDA, the mid-review cycle meeting is an optional meeting. It's offered to people who have had previous product development or pre-submission meetings. It generally occurs midpoint of the review plus 30 days. You do not need to request this meeting. The regulatory project manager associated with the ANDA will reach out to you to schedule the meeting if you qualify. It'll provide you with an update on the status of the review and any next steps. So when you're trying to determine whether you should be submitting a controlled correspondence or a product development meeting, you should consider that controlled correspondences are really meant for a single or small group of closely related questions regarding one element, a specific element of your development program. The FDA will respond within 60 or 120 days, depending on whether it's complex or standard. And controlled correspondences, your product could be complex or not complex. If you're eligible for a pre-ANDA meeting under GDUFA 2, this is the best choice for multidisciplinary questions. And the meeting will be held within 120 days of being granted. So FDA will grant a meeting if it meets certain criteria that's defined in the GDUFA 2 commitment letter. So if there's no PSG posted by FDA, if you're proposing an alternate approach other than that that's listed in the PSG, example here is the change in study type in vitro instead of in vivo approach. Your meeting package is complete. Your questions are out of scope of a controlled correspondence and could not be adequately addressed through controlled correspondence. And a meeting would significantly improve an ANDA review efficiency. Depending on FDA available resources, we may grant a meeting if it concerns other complex products that are not discussed in the previous slide. In other words, a PSG is posted and you're not proposing an alternate approach. So this slide gives you an overview of the meeting process. This is also in the map that was mentioned earlier for evaluating pre-ANDA and pre-submission meetings. The first stage is 30 days, but starting actually next week in the first October 1st, with GDUFA, the third year of GDUFA 2. It's 30 days where the FDA will evaluate your meeting package and decide whether to grant or deny. And we'll send you written notification at the end of that period. If your meeting is granted, we will offer you a meeting date within 120 days of the grant letter. And following the meeting, FDA will issue the final meeting minutes within 30 days. When you're getting ready to submit your meeting request, there's a couple administrative items you need to take care of. You need to obtain a pre-assigned ANDA number, and the link here will provide you information on how to do that. You'll submit your meeting request via the CDER Direct Next Gen Collaboration Portal, which is a mouthful, but we'll call it the portal from now on. And this is an image of what you would see if you go to the portal to submit your meeting request. And this is also a link directly to the portal, the image. So when you go to submit your meeting request, you need to develop your package for the appropriate meeting type. So if it's a product development meeting, you want to provide your specific proposals and questions supported by appropriate data and justification. And Suneela later will give you good examples of types of questions you should submit in your meeting package. If it's a pre-submission meeting, you want to outline anything that's unique or novel or complex about your upcoming submission. And if you have any questions that you want to include, provide the appropriate material to address those questions. So when you're putting together your meeting package, please refer to the draft guidance for industry. Each question that's in your package should be followed by corresponding justification, rationale, and data. And you'll hear that again and again in these presentations. A list of questions grouped by discipline. And each question should be clearly numbered, and we recommend that you avoid the use of sub-bullets, 1A, B, C, so forth. So during the meeting request evaluation phase, there's parallel assessments that occur within the Office of Generic Drugs and the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality. Assessment teams will look at the details of and content and questions in your meeting request and OGD and OPQ will coordinate to provide you with a unified decision on whether to grant or deny. If your meeting is denied, we will send you written notification with the reason for denial and also with a potential path forward. Suneela is going to go into that in more detail in the second half of this presentation. So if your meeting is granted, it'll typically be granted as a face-to-face if it falls under the will grant category. And applicants also have the option to request a different format, such as a written response or teleconference. If you have a written response meeting or a teleconference, you still do qualify for a mid-review cycle meeting. And a project manager from ORS will be assigned to be your point of contact through the meeting process. So the pre- and the meeting package assessment, FDA staff will go in and review all the information in your package. They'll request consults from other disciplines if needed, and send you information requests if they determine additional information is needed. Information requests will be sent to you through the portal, and you can respond through the portal. And we strive to send these to you as early in the process as possible, but we can send them at any time. So preliminary responses that you receive will be based on the agency's current thinking and knowledge and could change depending on new available data or research. We strive to send you the preliminary responses at least 5 days prior to your scheduled meeting. When you receive and review your preliminary responses, it's really your opportunity to decide what questions have been adequately addressed and which question you need to further clarify at the meeting. So you should submit your revised agenda at least 48 hours before the meeting and clearly prioritize the questions that still need to be discussed. It's important. This is important. It should not generate the submission of any new questions. This really, the purpose is to clarify the comments that were provided to you. If you decide that all your questions were adequately addressed, you have the right to cancel your meeting. You can contact the project manager if you choose to do so. You will still be eligible for a mid-review cycle meeting if you cancel your meeting after receiving preliminary responses. You also have the option, if you have a face-to-face meeting, to change the format to a teleconference if you decide that you don't need to come in, you only have a few clarifying questions. On the day of the meeting, you'll have 1 hour to discuss those clarifications with the agency. That's why it's very important to prioritize your questions and that you want to discuss. And FDA will not discuss any new data or questions that were not in your original meeting package. Following the meeting, you have, if you choose to submit a meeting summary for consideration, you have 7 days after the meeting to do so, and you would submit that via the portal. And FDA will issue the official and final minutes 30 days after. So I'm really quickly going to touch base on competitive generic therapy, but only in the context of pre-ANDA meetings. So if you were to submit and receive CGT designation, you would be eligible for a product development or a pre-submission meeting. This includes both complex and non-complex products. If you do submit a meeting request and have received CGT designation, you should submit that with your meeting request. Another important thing to note is that although this is not a new meeting type, it does not provide, in the respect that it does not provide you an expedited timeline. It'll follow the same timeline that I described previously in the slide that had the overview. So FDA considers different factors when they're trying to determine whether to grant or deny your meeting request for CGT with CGT. So the complexity of developing an ANDA for that specific drug, potential health impact, and the impact on FDA resources and workload commitments. So I'll be back for the panel discussion, but I'm now going to turn this over to Suneela.
Good morning. Karen has just given you a very good overview on the pre-ANDA program and the process. What I'm going to do next is focus on the pre-ANDA metrics and give you some tips for a successful submission of your pre-ANDA meeting request. So before going into the metrics, I have a few slides on pharmaceutical quality and what it means to different stakeholders. A quality product of any kind consistently meets the expectations of the user, and drugs are no different. Patients expect safe and effective medicine with every dose they take. And pharmaceutical quality is assuring every dose is safe and effective, free of contamination and defects. It is what gives patients confidence in their next dose of medicine. So with that, let's just go ahead and look at the pre-ANDA metrics. So what I'm going to present today is all the data that's from fiscal year 2018 until June 30th of fiscal year 2019. So as you see, in 2019, in just 9 months, we received almost the same number of meeting requests that we received in 2018. So that indicates that we're doing good with the program. And as you see, in 2018, you have about 40% denials. And that went down significantly to 28%. So thank you for following the guidance and improving the quality of your meeting packages. So all that this slide tells you is that there are a lot more product development submissions than pre-submissions, which is not a surprise for complex products. So this is kind of expected. So here what we did was we took all the pre-ANDA meeting requests that were granted, and we categorized them based on the complex category listed in the GDUFA 2 commitment letter. So both in 2018 and 2019, what you see is most of the pre-ANDA requests fell into the category of route of delivery, which basically includes topicals and ophthalmics. And this is followed by the drug-device combinations. So here what we did was we took all the pre-ANDAs that were received, and then we took all the pre-ANDAs that were granted, and we categorized them based on the drug delivery route. So again, what you see here is that the dermals were the leading category here, followed by injectables, and then inhalations and nasals. But if you see here, the orals, though they seem like we have a lot of pre-ANDA meeting requests, but then that were granted were only just a few, like we see only 9 here. And this is because most of the oral products that we receive are not complex and are denied. So as Karen already mentioned, there are 3 types of meeting requests meetings that you can request: face-to-face, written response, and telecon. As you see, the most popular ones here are the face-to-face meetings. And also, as Karen already mentioned, that if we see that about 13 of them were canceled in year 1 because the applicant was satisfied with the preliminary written response given by the agency. And you see similar trends with year 2 submissions as well. So some of the common reasons for denial. A meeting package can be denied either because it's incomplete or it's inadequate. And sometimes it should have been a control correspondence instead of a pre-ANDA meeting request. And sometimes we see that a wrong meeting type is chosen. A product development is chosen instead of a pre-sub, or a pre-sub is chosen for a product development meeting. And sometimes it's because it's out of scope of the GDUFA 2 commitment letter. So like maybe it's not a complex product, or it's not a 505J route. And sometimes we see pre-ANDA meeting requests for ANDAs that were already received. And again, if there is a PSG available and you're not asking for an alternate bioequivalence route, or if you don't have a complex question in there, then there's a possibility that you can get denied. So if we took all the denial reasons and plotted them, what you see here is in the first year, we had more denials because they were supposed to be control correspondences instead of product development meetings. However, that came down significantly in 2019. And relatively what we see this year is more number of denials because of the meeting package being incomplete. So I know denial letters are pretty hard. However, on the brighter side, you see a path forward, very clear path forward on what you should be doing. So for incomplete meeting packages, we clearly tell you what is missing. So then you could come back with a more complete submission. And for inadequate meeting packages, we tell you what type of justification you need that is missing or what is insufficient. And then you can resubmit your meeting package again. For others, we give you a clear reason for denial so that you can get back on the right track. So here's an example response from the agency on an incomplete meeting package. This firm did not submit submit specific questions, and there was a lot of information missing. So we did tell them what was missing, and they could come back with a complete response. So here's an example of inadequate meeting package response that we gave to a firm. This is basically a dermal product where the firm is submitting cutaneous pharmacokinetic studies to demonstrate bioequivalence between the test and the reference product. And they had insufficient information, and there was some data that was needed to evaluate their meeting package. So we did give them enough adequate guidance on how they should come back with their new package. So here are some helpful tips to avoid denials. So there are 3 things that you need to have in meeting package. Preliminary data to support your approach, the new proposal, any kind of new proposal that you have. Specific questions about your development plan and group by discipline. And most importantly, justification to support your approach and any new methods that you have used. Again, if you have compositional similarity questions, yes, this is the pathway to discuss alternate BE approaches for your formulation. And if you know you do not have compositional similarity, please include your justification. So I'll go over a few pre-ANDA questions that we think are effective questions. So in both the cases, the firm did submit all the data that they needed to submit along with justification and specific questions. And one of the questions that they had in the package was, as you see in the bullet point 2 there, if their physicochemical tests that they were presenting are appropriate to support the comparative physicochemical characterization of their test product with the RLD. This is a very valid question because they had all the data to go with it and asked a specific question. And the first question seems to be a little more an ANDA review assessment issue where they asked if additional critical material attributes and critical process parameters are adequate. So in that case, we would kind of give a general comment, but again, it would be a little more falling back onto the ANDA assessment. So here's a typical question that we receive for dermal kind of products where the firm proposes alternate in vitro bio approach. And here in this case, the firm had a detailed approach with justification and characterization data, and they were asking agency if they would recommend any other additional in vitro characterization studies. So this is, again, a very standard question for this kind of product, and this is a very effective question. So this is for inhalation product, and this is a very interesting question, in my opinion, because the firm has used a very novel approach to study particle size distribution of the API in the test in RLD. And the firm is asking if their approach with that question, with that method is reasonable. So here, like Karen mentioned, we have a research component to the GDUFA for the GDUFA programs, and we have an Office of Testing and Research that performs active research in all these novel areas. And we could give the agency a very clear response on this based on the research that was done on this particular technique. So this is something that we always say that it's an ANDA assessment issue. Controls, adequacy of current controls in the finished product. So you would see a pretty standard response from the agency on saying that this is an ANDA assessment issue. However, when we see something with your methods, we do try to give you general comments. In this case, we did see something with their drug release method, and we did give them some general comments on the method. So some examples for pre-submission type of meeting packages. So, this is typically a format question where the firm's asking if their BCS study, where the BCS study table should go into. So this is more like a format question, which is very typical of pre-submission questions. And again, this is a combination device, a combination product, a device, where the firm is asking if they really need to submit the design history files, and if yes, where they should go. The third example is for a complex drug substance. The firm actually has its sameness studies, like API sameness studies, and they've already submitted it in their DMF. And now they wanted to know if they should submit the same data again in the ANDA. So these are typical pre-submission type of questions where we do not have to review a lot of data and data that you've submitted. So now let's just go ahead and look at some control correspondence type of questions, which are not typically pre-ANDA type of questions. What I would like to mention before I go in here is that if you have a control correspondence type of question, but you have other pre-ANDA type of questions and you tag them along with it, I think that's not a problem. But if you have all your questions as control correspondence type of questions, then that's when it will be redirected towards control correspondence. So this is a question where the firm had a drug, it's a device, drug device, and the firm had a question on some of the tests that they wanted to conduct, like chemical and microbial tests. They were asking if they could conduct them on the drug product filled cartridges instead of an assembled device. So this is pretty straightforward question and does not need a dialogue with the agency and is a control correspondence, can go through control correspondence. And similarly, sometimes straightforward questions on overages can be answered through control correspondence. So here are some questions that I'm going to give you that are clearly not pre-ANDA questions. So the first question, it's an inhalation product where the firm used a drug substance that's majorly amorphous. They say that there might be insignificant amounts in crystalline form. So now the firm is asking if they could just do crystallinity testing in just the drug substance release specification and not in the drug product. So this is, as you see, this is not a pre-ANDA question, and the reviewers have to look at the entire application to make this decision. So again, manufacturing process controls, in-process tests, and limitations on potential impurities, all of these are not pre-ANDA questions. They're all ANDA review assessment issues. So with that, let's just look at some takeaways from this presentation. So as I said, you need to have all the data, justification, and specific questions. And when I say specific questions, instead of saying, please review the protocol, we would expect that you submit specific questions regarding your protocol. And instead of saying, what tests should I do, we would expect that you propose your development plan with appropriate justification, have some of your questions, and say if there are any questions, if there are any tests that we are missing. Instead of saying, is my PK study acceptable, we would expect that you identify the points of uncertainty and ask a specific question. And again, like I said in my previous slide, specification questions are all ANDA review assessment issues. So if you have a question about your specification, we would expect that you understand and present how you will control your critical quality attributes and have a specific question, and we can probably give you some general comments. So some other takeaways from both of our presentation here: use the portal to submit your meeting request, and read the guidance to help develop a meeting package. And please be aware of the map on pre-ANDA meeting request that was just released this September. So I do not have that in the slides, but please do refer to that map. So choose the correct pathway, either product development, pre-submission, and control correspondence. Make a discrimination between these three and probably choose the right pathway before you submit. Ask specific questions grouped by discipline provides sufficient information to address your question. And we will look forward to meeting with you. So here are some point of contact, and I will be back after Susan's done her presentation to answer any questions. Thank you.